Hey, you've tuned into Math with Mr. C, and this time we're doing 19.9, appropriate use of statistical measures. Basically, we're answering the question today, should I use the mean or the median to show the middle of a data set? Moving on in 3, 2, 1. Here's your chance to check your homework from stem and leaf plots practice. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so which measure of central tendency, mean or median, is most useful to describe a given situation? Gary says he usually gets 98 on his weekly quiz. Does his statement accurately describe his overall performance? We're about to show you some scores. Justify your answer using measures of central tendency. Now let's see what Gary's scores are if he usually gets a 98. So here are Gary's scores on a stem and leaf plot. I see that he has a 65, he's gotten a 65 on his test, an 85, an 87, an 88, a 90, a 91, a 92, a 93, and two 98s. I'm trying to figure out, why did he say that he usually gets a 98? I think it's because that's his mode. He has gotten a 98 more than anything else. He's gotten it twice, and the rest he has gotten once. Now, is that fair for him to say that he usually gets a 98? It makes it seem like he gets amazing scores. Does he get amazing scores every time? So when we get this data, our mean is 88.7, and our median is 90.5, and our mode is, just like here, 98. We see a score right here, 65. That's an outlier. How do I know that? Well, look at this big gap, 85 to 65. There's a gap of 20. And stem and leaf plots really easily show me outliers because there's gaps in this information. There's nothing in the 70 section, so I know that 65 is an outlier. And do you notice what 65 does to the mean? Look at the difference between the mean and the median. 65 brings the average or the mean down. And so this outlier is kind of affecting our data. So let's look at this a little closer. The mode, 98, if he says he typically gets that, it seems like a lie. It makes his typical score seem better than it really is. So that's not a good thing to use for central data. The mean, 88.7, is affected too much by the outlier. It makes his typical score seem lower than it really is. His typical score is in the 90s here. If you see, he has most of them in the 90s. And the mean, it makes it seem like he usually gets something in the 80s, which isn't true. But the median, 90.5, is in the middle of the cluster of his typical scores. 90.5 would land right here, and that is right in the middle of the cluster of his scores. So therefore, the median is best to describe his performance. With the first clue word of blue, and there will be two of them, it includes the outlier and falls within the cluster of his typical scores. You do not have vocab notes today? Alright, so we're on to example 1. If anything's underlined in red, it should be written in your notebook. Suppose that 5 different stores sell a quart of milk for one of the following prices. So here's our list of numbers. For these list of numbers, we need to find the median, mode, and mean. I notice that they're already in order, and that's very nice. So to find our median, we're going to cross them off at the outside until we find the middle. So our median is $1.55. Already we're kind of thinking, if I say a quart usually sells for $1.55, does that accurately show the data? We're trying to think about that. Now we're going to do the mode. So for the mode, which one appears the most? I see that $1.50 appears twice, the rest only appear once. So $1.50 is the mode. Now I'm thinking, if I say that a quart of milk typically sells for $1.50, does that accurately display the data? Well, it does not, because most of them are above $1.50. So this would not be a good representation of the typical. Now let's do the mean. So to do the mean, we need to add them all together and then divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and you can use your calculator for this. So I added them all together and got $8.05, and I'm going to divide that by 5 because we have 5 numbers. When I divide it by 5, I get $1.61. Now I'm thinking, I know that the mean is the highest here. Which measure of central tendency best describes the data set? Now I'm looking and I'm thinking, do I have any outliers? Like a number that's significantly different than the rest? Well, all of these are within 30 cents. They're pretty close. And so I don't really think I have any outliers. And so if I say that if it's typically $1.55, that makes it seem cheaper than it could be because this is 25 cents bigger. Because there's not any outliers here, I think the mean would be the best to describe it, $1.61, because that includes the higher numbers. So there is my answer, and you can write that in your notes after you wrote what's red, underlined. And we're going to move on to number 2 in example 1 in 3, 2, 1. All right, for example 2, we're writing down these costs right here. Pretend that you went to a store and there's shoes at different prices. This data shows price in dollars of athletic shoes one store has on sale. Does the mean, median, or mode best describe what's typical for this data set? So first we need to find the mean, median, and mode. The mode, I see there's 50 twice, so my mode is 50. They're not already in order, so I need to put them in order. All right, now they're in order. So what's the median? The median is 60. And what's the mean? All right, let me add those all together and divide by 5. All right, I added all these together, I got 320. I divide by 5, and I get 64. In your opinion, before I tell you, which one of these do you think more accurately describes the data set? If somebody says, how much did shoes cost at that store? And these are the price of the shoes, would you tell them they typically cost 50, they typically cost 60, or they typically cost 64? Think about that. I'm going to give you 10 seconds. Alright, I would accept either answer of mean or median, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. Alright, so you need something like this underneath your number 2. This is what I wrote. See, the 90 kind of makes the mean more than it should be because the rest of the shoes are between 70 and 50. So, but either way, these are pretty close, so I could use the mean or the median. I'm going to go to example 2, and you'll see why the median is even more important. All right, so now we have pretty much the same problem as example 1, but I added 2 numbers. Please try to find the mean, median, and mode, and come back. Please unpause the video once you have those in 3, 2, 1. All right, so we have a mean of 80.7, a median of 70, and a mode of 50 and 70. So which one would best describe what is typical for this data set? Did you notice that this was a big old giant outlier that's so different from the rest of us, for the rest of those shoes? So these are like some typical prices of shoes between 50 and 90. And I know this is kind of an outlier too, but this is super outlier. It's very obvious to me. These are the most expensive shoes you can get at the store. And they raise the mean more than $10 over the median. So would I say that the shoes typically cost 70, 50, or 80.7? Well, if you get rid of the 175, I can see that this is typically a cluster between 50 and 90. And here I made a quick stem and leaf plot, and I hope that you can see that this is kind of an outlier here, but this is a cluster compared to, oh my gosh, look at this giant gap to 175. That's a big outlier, and it's going to skew our mean. Because of that, the median is the best to use. All right, and at this time, please write this underneath number 1. We're going to go on to number 2 in 3, 2, 1 with the second clue word of crate. All right, here's number 2. Please write down the data, mean, median, and mode, and try to answer these questions to see how well you can interpret this data. I'm going to show you the answers in 5, 2, 1. So this is where it didn't actually give you the data set, and we're just kind of interpreting it, but the middle number, the median, is 13,000. Which number occurs at least twice? 12,500, because that's the mode or the most. I know it has to occur more than once if it's the most. Why must the other two numbers in the data set be greater than 13,000? Well, that's because the mean is so much greater than the median. It's $1,000 bigger, which means that the mean has been skewed to be larger. There must have been larger numbers to make the average so much bigger. What is a possible data set for these measures? This doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to find the actual mean of the data set, but it could be something like this. This is a possible data set right here. Do you see these are really close? Here's the median, here's our mode, and then we have this outlier of 19,000, which raised the mean to 14,000. So which measure of central tendency would best describe this data set? What do you think? So our answer is the median would best describe this data set, as it is less affected by the outlier. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, here's independent or partners practice. Please write your information here. Please answer these numbers, and I'm going to show you the answers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, for the median, I put them in order. $60. What's the mean of the data set? You add them all together and divide by 9. All right, and there are your answers for the rest of independent practice. Moving on in 3, 2, 1. Please click below for the Khan Academy video and practice, and then you may choose these options. Thank you for watching, and you're awesome.